In this video, I am going to give you a brief introduction to SVM algorithm. What do you mean by support vector machine algorithm? And then I will be discussing with you about how the Android malwares are being predicted by employing this SVM algorithm. So firstly, I am going to give you a brief introduction to SVM, support vector machine algorithm. So what do you mean by support vector machine algorithm? So they are powerful machine learning algorithms which are used for classification and regression. So whenever I want to do any kind of classification and regression task, I can go for this SVM, support vector machine algorithm. Clear with this? So firstly, I am going to give you a brief introduction to support vector machine. So what do you mean by this support vector machine algorithm? So they are powerful machine learning algorithms which are used for classification and regression tasks. So they are mostly used for classification problems. So as I was telling you, right, in doing any kind of machine learning developments, there are two different types of machine learning techniques. One is called as a classification problem and one more is called as a regression problem. So we have two different types of machine learning techniques. One is called as a classification problem and one more is called as a regression problem. So SVM algorithms, support vector machine algorithms, they are mostly used for classification problems. So they have their way of implementation when compared to other algorithms. So each and every type of algorithm, it has got its own unique way of implementation. So whenever I am going for SVM algorithm or some other type, so I have different types of machine learning models. I can go for decision tree algorithms, random forest algorithms. So each and every type of algorithm, it has got its own unique way of implementation. So they are popular. So SVM algorithms are popular because they are able to handle continuous and categorical variables. Clear with this? So they can handle continuous variables and also categorical variables. So whatever may be the type of problem. So based on my problem, I can go for different types of machine learning models or machine learning techniques. So how does this SVM algorithm, support vector machine algorithm, so how it works? So what do you mean by this SVM, support vector machine algorithm? So how this SVM algorithm, so how it works? So it is a representation of different classes in a hyperplane in a multi-dimensional space. Clear with this? So I can go for different types of classes in a multi-dimensional space. The hyperplane, so whenever I am going for any type of algorithm, so it has got its own unique way of implementation. So there will be a dividing line or a hyperplane. The hyperplane will be generated in an iterative manner by SVM. Clear with this? So there is a dividing line. So how I am going to classify them into two different classes? There will be a dividing line, hyperplane. So the dividing line, the hyperplane will be generated in an iterative manner by SVM so that error can be minimized. So what is the aim of any type of machine learning model? So I have to minimize the error and I have to maximize the accuracy. So that is the main aim of any of these machine learning techniques. So whether I am going for SVM, support vector machine algorithm, or I am going for random forest algorithm, or I am going for decision tree algorithm. So whatever may be the type of algorithm. So what is the aim of all these types of machine learning models or machine learning techniques? So I have to minimize the error or the cost function and I have to maximize the accuracy. So the hyperplane, the dividing line or the hyperplane, it will be generated in an iterative manner by SVM. Clear with this? The hyperplane will be generated in an iterative manner by SVM so that error can be minimized. So how I am going to generate the dividing line or the hyperplane? What is the main aim of this SVM algorithm, support vector machine algorithm? So the main aim of this SVM support machine algorithm. So I have to divide the data sets into classes in order to find the maximum marginal hyperplane. So how I am going to divide the data sets into classes, two different classes. So such that I have to find the maximum marginal hyperplane. Clear with this? So following are the important concepts in SVM. So what do you mean by a support vector? What do you mean by a hyperplane, and what do you mean by a margin? So what do you mean by this support vector? So whenever I am going for any type of models, whether it can be an SVM algorithm or decision tree or random forest algorithm. So following are the important concepts you should learn about SVM. So how I am going to choose the best fit line, that is the dividing line or the hyperplane, such that I have to minimize the error function or the cost function, and I have to maximize the accuracy. So that is the main aim of any of these machine learning models. So whether it can be a decision tree classifier, random forest classifier, or support vector machine algorithm. So what is the aim of all these types of algorithms? I have to minimize the error and I have to maximize the accuracy. So following are the important concepts you should learn about SVM. So whenever I am speaking of this SVM algorithm, support vector machine algorithm, so following are the important concepts you should learn about SVM algorithm, support vector machine. So what do you mean by a support vector? So the data points that are closest to the hyperplane, they are called as the support vectors. So I have to choose the dividing line or the separating line such that I have to choose the best fit line. Clear with this? So I have to minimize the error and I have to maximize the accuracy. So the data points that are closest to the hyperplane, they are called as the support vectors. The points which lie closest to the hyperplane, the dividing line, they are called as the support vector. So separating line will be defined with the help of these data points. And hyperplane, so it is a decision plane which is divided between a set of objects having different classes, that is called as a hyperplane. And margin, so all these are the different concepts. So whenever I am going to discuss with you about any type of algorithm, so all these are the different concepts you should understand. So what do you mean by a hyperplane? So it is a decision plane, it is divided between a set of objects having different classes. So it is a dividing line or a decision plane, it is divided between a set of objects having different classes. And margin, so what do you mean by this margin? It is nothing but the gap between the two lines or the closest data points of different classes. Clear with this? So this is called as the margin. So all these are the different SVM concepts you should understand. So whenever I am going for this support vector machine algorithm, so all these are the different concepts you should understand. So it can be defined as the perpendicular distance from the line to the support vectors. So large margin is considered as good margin and small margin is considered as bad margin. Clear with this? So what are the important concepts you should learn about SVM, support vector machine algorithm? So all these are the important concepts you should learn about SVM, support vector machine algorithm. So what do you mean by a support vector? So the data points, the hyperplane, the dividing line. So how I am going to divide the data points into two different classes, the dividing line, the separating line. So the data points that are closest to the hyperplane, they are called as the support vector. And hyperplane, it is a decision plane which is divided between a set of objects having different classes. I have to choose the best fit line. So each and every type of algorithm, so it has got its own unique way of implementing. So it has its own unique way of operating or implementing. So I have to choose the best fit line such that I have to minimize the error function or the cost function and I have to maximize the accuracy. So what do you mean by this hyperplane? So it is a decision plane, it is divided between a set of objects having different classes. So it is called as a hyperplane. is margin. So whenever I am considering this SVM, so all these are the important concepts you should understand. So what do you mean by this margin? So it is nothing but the gap between the two lines on the closest data points of different classes. So it is called as a margin. It is defined as the perpendicular distance from the line to the support vectors. So large margin is considered as good margin and small margin is considered as bad margin. So what is the main goal of this SVM? So I have to divide the data sets into classes in order to find a maximum marginal hyperplane. Clear with this? So it will generate, so it can be generated. So how I am going to generate this? I have to find the best fit line. So how I am going to generate this maximum marginal hyperplane? So it can be done in the following steps. So SVM, it is going to generate the hyperplanes iteratively that separates the classes in the best way. So I have to choose the hyperplane that separates the classes. Clear with this? So what do you mean by this SVM, support vector machine algorithm? So I just gave a brief introduction to SVM, support vector machine algorithm. So next I am going to discuss with you about the implementation of this SVM in Python. So how this algorithm, SVM algorithm, so how it is implemented in Python language. So firstly I am going to discuss with you about the kernel technique. So whenever I am going to discuss with you about this SVM algorithm, so how I am going to transform, that is convert the data from one dimensional space, input space, into the required form. So the SVM algorithm, so it is implemented with the help of a kernel technique. So it transforms the input data space into the required form. It uses a trick called kernel trick, which transforms a low dimensional space into high dimensional space. So it separates, what is the use of this kernel trick? So it separates the non-separable problems into separable problems by adding more dimensions to it. So that is the main use of this kernel trick. So it makes SVM more flexible and accurate. So what are the different types of kernels used by SVM, support vector machine algorithm? So firstly I just gave a brief introduction to SVM kernel. So what is the use of this kernel? It separates the non-separable problems into separable problems by adding more dimensions to it. So how I am going to, I was telling you, right, so how I am going to generate the hyperplane and how I am going to divide the data points into two different classes. With the help of this kernel technique. So SVM algorithm is implemented with the kernel that transforms the input data space into the required form. So I have different types of kernel techniques. So different types of kernels are used by SVM. The first one is a linear kernel. The second one is a polynomial kernel. And the third one is the RBF, real basis function. So all these are the different types of kernel techniques used by SVM algorithm. So based on my requirement, I can use any of these kernel techniques, kernel tricks or kernel techniques. So what do you mean by this linear kernel? So I have all these are the different types of kernels used by SVM. So what do you mean by this linear kernel? So from the term you can just understand. So what are the different types of kernel tricks used by SVM? So linear kernel, it can be used as a dot product between any two observations. For example, k of x comma xi equal to sum of x into xi. So product between any two vectors x and xi is the sum of the multiplication of each pair of input values. So this is called as a linear kernel. And there is one more type of kernel technique, it is called as a polynomial kernel. So all these are the different types of kernels used by SVM. linear kernel and differentiate curved or non-linear input space. For example, I am just mentioning here 1 plus sum of x into xi to the power d. So d is the degree of the polynomial which we need to specify manually in the learning algorithm. Clear with this? So this is what is called as a polynomial kernel. And there is one more type of kernel technique, it is called as a radial basis function. So RBF kernel. So what is the use of this RBF kernel? So it is used in SVM classification task. So whenever I want to do any kind of classification task, I can go for this RBF kernel, radial basis function. So it maps the input space in indefinite dimensional space. So how I am going to map the input space in indefinite dimensional space? With the help of this RBF, radial basis function. So this is the corresponding mathematical formula. So exponential of minus gamma into sum of x minus x square, it is stored in the variable k of x comma xi. Clear with this? So based on my requirement, it is like a transformation function. So far I was discussing. So how to generate the maximum marginal hyperplane. So how I have to choose the dividing line or the separating line. So I have to choose the best fit line such that I have to minimize the error or the cost function and I have to maximize the accuracy. Clear with this? So what is the use of this SVM, support vector machine algorithm? So this is the main use of this SVM, support vector machine algorithm. Till this part, whatever I am speaking, everything is clear. So what is the use of this SVM? That is SVM algorithm, it is used for linearly separable data. So many types of plots can be drawn using this SVM. So I just gave a brief introduction to this algorithm. So what do you mean by this SVM? That is support vector machine algorithm. So different types of plots can be drawn using this SVM algorithm. Let me just show you a simple implementation example of this. So what are all the essential libraries? First, I need to import the corresponding libraries. Clear with this? From sklearn. So firstly, I am just importing the corresponding libraries. If I want to use pandas library or if I want to use numpy. So for doing any kind of machine learning development or data science development, so firstly I need to import the corresponding libraries. So what are all the essential libraries that are required for my development? So after importing the corresponding libraries, so I am just loading the input data. So after loading my input data, so I am just plotting the SVM boundaries. So what are all the SVM boundaries? I am just plotting my SVM boundaries. Let me just show you a simple implementation example of this. So I am just showing in the form of a scatter plot. So SVC classifier, it is not defined. So I need to give the corresponding syntax. Clear with this? So this is one simple example of SVM, support vector machine algorithm. So I am loading the iris data set and I am plotting the boundaries. For example, x minimum, x maximum. So what is the boundary? So I am just plotting these boundaries. X max by x min divided by 100, it is stored in the variable h. And using this alias name, so I am creating a mesh grid. So whatever is the type of grid. So I am providing the value of regularization parameter. So how I am using this SVM, support vector classifier, whatever is the type of kernel, within single quotes I am giving here as linear kernel, and I am showing. So you can see here how my, based on features, sepal width and sepal length, how my flowers are classified into different species. Clear with this? So I just gave you a simple example of this. So next I am going to discuss with you about the implementation of this project. So how the Android malware, so each and every type of algorithm, so it can be used to solve one specific type of problem. So what is the main objective of this problem? So how the Android malwares can be predicted by employing this SVM, support vector machine algorithm. So Android malwares, how it can be predicted by employing this SVM, cyber threat analysis on Android apps. So how the cyber threats that are happening on different Android applications, that is intrusion, Android malwares can be predicted by using this SVM, support vector machine algorithm. So in the recent years, smartphones are increasing steadily, growth of Android applications, many smartphones, mobile phones, Android phones are growing at a very fast rate. So some intruder, he is creating some malicious Android application as tool to steal the sensitive data theft. Okay. So what do you mean by this Android apps? So whenever I have some confidential information, some people are trying to steal the data. Fraud, mobile banking, mobile wallets. So there are many malicious application detection tools and softwares are available. Clear with this? So what do you mean by this Android applications? So how I am going to tackle the complex malicious apps created by intruders and hackers? So currently in the existing system, so many malware detection tools have been developed. But some tools may not be able to detect newly created malware application and unknown malware application infected by various trojans, worms, spyware. So it is still a challenging task. So what is the disadvantage of my existing system? So whenever I am considering any type of system, it has got its own advantages and disadvantages. So what are all the various disadvantages of my existing system? So they are updated or created malicious applications. It is hard to find out. So non-machine learning approaches, they are not reliable and efficient. Existing approaches, they cover only 30 permissions out of 300 app permissions. So whenever some different types of attack occur, they cannot predict those attacks. So all these are the disadvantages of my existing system. In order to overcome the disadvantages of my existing system, so I am just coming for a proposed system. So what happens in the proposed system? So in the proposed paper, we implement significant permission identification. So we have different types of apps or applications. Significant permission identification. The goal of this SIGIT is to improve the app's permissions effectively and efficiently. So with the help of this SVM algorithm, we are trying to extract the features and we are trying to predict what are the different types of malwares that are affecting the system. The machine learning models are trained with the various types of data and it is going to give me more accurate results. So what are all the advantages of my proposed system? So it improves the percentage of detection, malicious application. Machine learning is better efficient than non-machine learning algorithm. Clear with this? So it is able to detect new malware Android applications. So all these are the advantages of my proposed system. So you can see here malicious apps trained data set, benign applications. So I am having some genuine apps and benign apps, and it is given to the data pre-processing phase. So whenever I want to remove some null values, or if I want to do some sort of encoding, so everything happens in the data pre-processing phase. After data pre-processing, it is given to the data pruning phase. So whenever I want to cut something, so I can go for different building detection systems, SVM algorithm, decision tree algorithms, and malware detection results. So finally I need to predict the results. So all these are the different modules that are involved in this project. So I have a data collection module, I have a pre-processing module, feature extraction module, and then classification module. So all these are the different modules that are present in this project. Clear with this? So what are the different modules? So all these are the different types of modules that are present in my project. So what are all the different hardware and software requirements that are essential to do this project? I require Windows 7, 8 or 10 64-bit operating system and 4 GB RAM memory capacity. And software requirements, I require Python idle, and everything is done in Anaconda Navigator and Jupyter Notebook. So all these are the different hardware and software requirements that are essential to do this project. So next I am going to discuss with you about the implementation of this project. So firstly I need to import the corresponding libraries. What are all the essential libraries that are required for my development? So firstly I need to import the corresponding libraries. So I am just importing the warnings module, I am importing pandas library. So what are all the essential libraries? I need to import the corresponding libraries. So what is the use of this pandas library? It is used for performing any kind of data manipulation task. And NumPy library, NumPy stands for numerical Python. It is used for performing any kind of mathematical operations. And Seaborn, it is used for performing any kind of data visualization task. And sklearn library, so it is used to evaluate. For example, I am importing this SVC, support vector classifier. And from sklearn.model selection, so I am importing this k-fold pre-processing module. So after importing the essential modules, first I need to read the CSV file. So using this alias name, using dot operator, there is an inbuilt function called read CSV function. So I am just reading the CSV file, train malware.csv, it is stored in the variable data. So whatever is the data, I am just printing this at the output. And data.shape attribute, so it returns a tuple containing the number of rows and columns. The first dimension denotes the number of rows, the second dimension denotes the number of columns. And data dot, there is an inbuilt function called sample function and fraction equal to 1. Dot reset index, so drop equal to true. So if I want to drop some index, so I am just calling this inbuilt function called reset index. It is stored in the variable data. And data.head function, whichever inbuilt functions I have to call, using the variable name, using dot operator, I am just calling this head function. 1 minute, let me just continue. So whichever inbuilt functions I have to call using the variable name using dot operator, I am just calling an inbuilt function called head function. So it just prints the head of my data frame, the first 5 rows of my data frame. And then I am importing the Cbond library. So what are all the essential libraries? I am just importing the corresponding libraries. So using this alias name using dot operator, I am just calling this count plot function. So in doing any kind of machine learning development, EDA, exploratory data analysis, it plays a very important step. So I am giving the x variable, so x equal to within single quotes I am giving here as type and data equal to data. So what are all the different types I am giving here, and the count I am taking along the y-axis. And data dot type dot value counts. So I am counting what are all the different values. It is stored in the variable target count. So class 0, so target count of 0, and class 1 I am having here as target count of 1. So data dot type dot value counts, it is stored in the variable count class 0 and then count class 1. So I am just printing the shape of my data and I am showing in the form of a count plot. And then I am separating the x and y values. So x equal to df testover dot ilog integer location. So I am giving here testover dot columns not equal to type and equal to type. Clear with this, I am separating the x and y values, and from sklearn.utils I am importing this shuffle module. So shuffle of, so x and y are given as input parameters to my shuffle module. So they are stored in the variable x comma y. So x dot head function, it just prints the head of my data frame, the first 5 rows of my data frame. And y dot head function, it prints the first 5 rows of my y. And from sklearn.feature selection, I am importing select k best. I am importing chi square module and I am choosing the select k best module from sklearn.feature selection. So I am just initializing this select k best score function. So I am giving here and k equal to 10. And best features dot fit function, it is used for training the machine learning model. X and y are given as inputs and it is stored in the variable fit. And pd dot data frame, so I am calling the scores in the columns. So I am concatenating df columns and df scores along the column axis, and then I am printing the n largest scores. Clear with this, so how the Android malwares, and then I am importing the drain test split module from this sklearn library, and finally I am using this, I am printing the confusion matrix and the metrics, and SVM dot linear SVC support vector classifier. So I am classifying the output, so how many SSN nodes are there, whether it is a good one or a malware one. And I am showing a confusion matrix, heat map kind of a thing. With this, I am just stopping this video. I hope I am clear with my topics. Today I gave you a brief introduction to what do you mean by that is SVM algorithm and how the Android malwares are being predicted by using this SVM algorithm. If you have any doubts, you can post your queries in the comment section. Remaining things, I will just continue in my next videos. Thank you all.